So I also live in the UK. I also live in the UK. So it's interesting always to find fellow friends like Danny that, we have our heritage in other places, and it's lovely to kind of go back and have these conversations. So thank you very much. I am going to start by sharing. Can I share a screen? Rishi, maybe, or whoever has control over the meeting. Yes, I now can do that.
Yeah, you can proceed now.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm going to leave it here so we can see a little bit of how it's going. We'll talk a little bit about domestic violence and what No More does. I'm not going to go into all the detail, but I think one of the things that we can do is I would ask anybody to please, it's not a lecture in the typical sense, at least of the first part of it. So if you have any questions around domestic violence, around sexual violence, I think this is a kind of a close group and a good moment to ask or comment, or I always like to kind of think about this as safe spaces. So please do stop me and do ask anything or comment on anything that you have. So just starting quickly, you can read a little bit about what the problem really is with domestic and sexual violence, but I'll summarize it for you. It is a epidemic of global proportions. So there is not a country in the world that you stand where this is not a big problem. It doesn't matter if the country is big, small, cultural, history, background, it happens everywhere. And actually, the figures tend to be very similar throughout the world. This 1 in 3, 1 in 4 is common, and we'll see that in the next slide. Domestic violence and sexual violence happens to women, but it also happens to men. Many men are affected by domestic violence. And I think it's very important for me to also mention that. And then I think when we're thinking about supporting, sometimes it's more difficult for men to come and actually even recognize that this is happening to them. So that's really important. And also with sexual violence. And again, this starts early in some relationships. Maybe your first girlfriend, boyfriend, age 15, 14, 16 might already be in some kind of abusive situation. So just keeping in mind that this happens to the very young and to the very old also. So for Trinidad, as for any other country, the problem is very similar. We have, more than 30% of women have reported actually intimate partner violence or sexual violence at least once. That is a third of all women in the country. And so again, it goes to this, 1 in 3 women also have experienced sexual violence. And actually, there is also another statistic here that is slightly more atypical to other countries, which is around sexual violence by non-partners. It tends to be usually that sexual violence is committed usually by somebody that you know. Actually, every 9 out of 10 sexual assaults happen by somebody you know. That stat seems a little bit, in a way, the other way around here, but it could just be because many people in relationships are not reporting that that's happening to them, or they're not recognizing that these incidents of sexual violence are happening within the household. Again, any questions, any comments, please, stop me. I can talk forever if you let me. So what is No More? What do we do? No More is a global organization that works to prevent domestic and sexual violence. Well, we do that by increasing awareness, inspiring action, and really trying to change the culture at many different levels. And we do that with corporations, non-for-profits, governments. This is such a big problem that costs so many lives. In the United States, for example, domestic violence, deaths, counting suicides because of domestic violence is, is one of the 3 top causes of death for women. I mean, it's staggering. And for us, it's just very important to make sure that we're really trying to find solutions. We don't have to admit for the status quo. We don't have to believe that this is just like it is and it will always be. Many radical changes have happened, and so we work actively for that. And so a little bit in detail, how do we do it? Like, we do large scale media campaigns, of which Danni will come in and will give you an example of the work that we did together for the Commonwealth. And that's very important, right? Just getting the message out there to people that, we can. One of the things that I grew up in Honduras, and this was happening in many houses. And the problem is that nobody was talking about it. It's kept secret, and the secrecy on domestic violence, it what just enables it to carry on happening. So it's very important that these campaigns exist and we can talk more about it as we're doing today. We try to educate and engage the community so they can use resources, great resources for them to be able to take this message out. We ensure that we connect with organizations such as yourself, civil society, and we do activism moments for them. We have a week, for example, every year we call No More Week, and every year more countries and people from all over the world are joining on races and activities to say no more, really, to this. And we also provide outreach and technical assistance. We usually work with corporations who really want to get involved and really want to kind of promote the message and use their branding to get a bit more out there. One of the things that Rishi mentioned when he introduced me so nicely was that we created the first global directory for domestic and sexual violence. You can go to it. It's nomoredirectory.org, and you will find every country. I want to say almost every country in the world. We don't have North Korea and we don't have Afghanistan for reasons that you can imagine. But you'll find, all the resources. You can go there, go to the Americas, and you'll find Trinidad, and you can get, all the services that are available in Trinidad, for example. It was very important that I think all of these numbers were put together. We couldn't believe that this did not exist. And we've partnered with many companies now, as you see below, from, we're launching a campaign with A1 tomorrow, who's promoting the directory, and, many other, TripAdvisor, Vodafone, who are also promoting, and many companies who are using this tool. And finally, from my side, and kind of introducing Danni's part, No More formed a partnership around, the partnership really kind of kicked off around 2 or 3 years ago. But the work in a way started around 5 years ago when the new Secretary General came into post, and we had launched a UK version of No More here in the United Kingdom, and that's part of the work that we do. We have No More campaigns in over 40 No More campaigns. Countries like Australia says No More, for example, South Africa says No More, Ecuador says No More, and we one day would love to see one, a Trinidad says No More campaign, for example. But the Commonwealth wanted to create a campaign for the 54 members. We develop a site called commonwealthsaysnomore.org. You can go there and you'll find two things about Trinidad. You will find all the numbers that you can access, but there's also a little bit of a library on documents about gender-based violence in Trinidad. We have each one of the 54 countries in there, and that was quite exciting. And part of our idea is the Commonwealth holds a third of the world population. It has a big number of people under 30, and so we really want to kind of get the message out there and educate on this topic. So the partnership has been very successful. Many countries are engaging. I think the Bahamas have just published a No More task force where they're like making a series of commitments on this topic. So yes, that's been quite exciting. I'm now going to pass to Danni, who will take us a little bit through the campaign, and then hopefully we can open the session and get some more questions and the ball rolling. Danni.
Thank you, Pam. Just a moment to share a touch on Gentle Forces. I set this up in 2020. Actually, it was a reaction to various things. Having worked in the brand marketing and communications and creative industry for nearly 20 years, and always striving to sort of do social impact. So finding the balance between creative and social impact. So that's Gentle Forces. And we exist to create meaningful impact. And that is either by building brands generally focused on positive impact and through purpose, or collaborating with partners to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. And this next, you can sort of click on, Pam, this next, this campaign, which has brought us to be invited to the Rotary Club event. Join the Chorus was a collaboration between Gentle Forces No More and the Commonwealth. And it shows us the power of coming together, what we call collective power. And it was sort of created, inspired by the power of storytelling, a fable mechanic, and it used high-level talent across the world. This is FKA Twigs. She's English Jamaican, and there's Tandiway Newton and so on. I'll explain, but let's just take a moment to watch the video. You just need to present, Pam, for it to play. I think we just present near the share button at the top. Oh, you got it. Perfect. Oh, we can't hear the volume, Pam. I think it's because you're on mute.
Let me start again.
Home. It should be a space where we all feel safe. But for some, home can be a dangerous place with no escape. But while one voice might go unheard, a chorus cannot be ignored. Together, we can help free those harmed by domestic and sexual violence. Join the chorus and say, no more.
So we'll share this round afterwards, and you can watch it when it's not lagging. But this was a beautiful film and opportunity to talk about domestic and sexual violence in a very new way. Typically you show the problem and the effect, but actually this used the metaphor of birds and the flock of birds coming together to help save our bird who is harmed by domestic and sexual violence. So do watch that over again in your own time. And then this is the talent that we managed to get together. So FKA Twigs, the musician artist from the UK, does a lot of work in America. Jocelyn Damas is Ghana's very big TV host, an actor. Mahira Khan is a leading actor from Pakistan. Rose Byrne from Australia, she's been in many shows as well. And Tandiway Newton in the UK, Zimbabwean heritage, I believe. So all from the Commonwealth, as part of the Commonwealth Says No More, join the chorus. So that was how that came across. And then this was launched at sort of a side event of United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, in September. And that is, I guess, how you came about the press release, perhaps, or the news on The Guardian. And in the middle there, Secretary General at the top of the Commonwealth hosted the event. Danni Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the UN, spoke, and Deputy Secretary General of the WHO on the bottom left, and so on. Actor Colin Salmon and Dr. Trivedi, and Dr. Ruth as well. So really high profile leaders and ministers coming together to help join the chorus and end domestic and sexual violence. So this was important for us to see and to elevate. So this just goes into a little bit more detail. It's a prevention initiative, a short film called The Flock, amplifying it with talent. And the sort of key message really that home isn't a safe place for everyone. And the tree, you know, is the metaphor for home and the community. And every fable has a moral. And the moral of this story is, while one voice might go unheard, a chorus cannot be ignored. And so we encourage everyone to join the chorus and say no more. And as Pam said, whether we're man, woman, whoever we are, but if the opportunity to sort of talk openly about this, and to encourage conversation in community, in organisations, with our neighbours, as bystanders, you know, let's do more to try and end this shadow pandemic that it is seen as. So Pam, I don't know if you just want to take the end slides to close on this.
No, again, you've kind of mentioned this, you know, the purpose of joining the chorus, you know, it is this idea that, you know, this collectiveness can do something. This is a way for this, and we need everybody to be part. So this is not only for women's organizations, or it's not only for government, it's a community, business, all types of leadership that needs to be involved to be able to put an end to this. And the idea again is also to speak up, to raise awareness, to making sure that we combat those stigma, that we, you know, we don't allow that kind of, you know, boy talk to keep on happening, that we can challenge our children who are growing up on, you know, and how to treat others. You know, it's also about ensuring that survivors can find resources. That's very important for us to know more. That's what we've done, the directory. And I would encourage the Rotary Club in this case to make sure that you have some information for, you know, anybody who, you know, is part of the club really, and needs information like this. Do we know that it happens to so many people that you will always one day be confronted by, you know, somebody who might need this information? And I think the other thing is very important, which I would usually kind of go into if we had more time to discuss, but when somebody discloses domestic or sexual violence, you might be the first person they're ever telling. And I think that's very important. If I can leave you with that message, right? That if somebody comes to you, you might be, you know, one of the few people they're trusting with this burden, this problem they have. So just to, you know, be as sensitive as possible, and making sure you also know where you can get the resources, to give them a telephone number, or to give them, you know, be able to get, you know, proper advice. So all of this, you know, all of us talking about this is really important. And just to kind of give you a, you know, last line and a good idea about what was achieved, or what is being achieved by Join the Chorus. Apart from that event, in social media, you know, there was a combined audience of over 17 million people. It was picked up by, again, many newspapers throughout the Commonwealth, and that was the case in Trinidad. For example, we did kind of a landing page in the website that had over 10,000 visits. And this has really been like, you know, 2 months from that. And here you see the publications in many countries. from launch, almost, 1 million impressions across social media channels just on the No More side. We're not measuring the Commonwealth or other partner organizations that have done this. And, we have had a lot of pledges, a lot of commitments. And tomorrow we're having an event where both of them where we're talking about join the chorus again, because they as a company have come together to say, we want to join the chorus. And this will be a thematic that would go through 2022. And that's what we are asking people already to put their voice, to just say, no more, and to make sure that, you're available there for people who need it. And that's, I think that's it from us. So I would love to, I'll stop sharing now so I can see everybody. And it'll be, if anybody has a question or a comment, it would be great to hear what you think.
Hi, good night again. I was looking back at the stats for where we have 1 in 9 men being abused over a lifetime. But tell me something, like from your knowledge and experience, do you think it could that probably men are not probably reporting as much as women report?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. One of my first job was in Manhattan Family Court in New York, and I specialized on men, male cases of domestic violence, and there are a couple of things. Yes, by one side, men are probably not talking, they're not speaking up. The forms in which domestic violence tend to be perpetrated to men are slightly different. They are less physical. They're more emotional, psychological, because, the matter of the fact is that women, don't have the same kind of level of physical strength to inflict physical violence at that level as a man can. But the emotional, psychological damage is there. And it's really interesting because when we had in court, for example, we had cases of men coming and saying, they were actually the perpetrators, and they were saying, oh, I was being abused. And then, men who were being abused came through, and the difference between somebody who's lying and somebody who's saying the truth, for example, is completely stark. In men, usually men who were victims of domestic violence would come in, they were not going to report, they just wanted information, they were blaming themselves about what was happening, it was never their partner's fault. They felt a lot of guilt for the situation, etc. So a lot of psychological abuse is there, and I think that's very difficult even for women to recognize sometimes that they're being controlled or that they're being, and for men, it goes against this notion of masculinity that we have, right? And I think that's one of the barriers. I always say that women, we've had a couple of revolutions in which we know the position of women today from 100 years ago is, has moved. But men seem to be always kind of stuck in a way in the same kind of, we're providers, we're strong, we're, and I think that role is changing for men. I think, you see that in things like paternity leave. So to round up your question, your answer is, I think yes, many men are not recognizing it, but also the ways in which that we are recognizing domestic violence. People, when you see the physical abuse, really quickly people think, but it's difficult for people to assess sometimes that, verbal abuse, emotional abuse is happening. And I think that's where men are, targeted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rudy. So I do have a question. I actually have a few, but I'll limit them to just 1 or 2. Okay. One is, do you guys have statistics throughout the Caribbean region in terms of, were there any produced graphs or to show that there's been a strong increase or a decrease in the Caribbean itself in domestic violence? And that's one. And the second question is, in terms of community policing, Now, the community policing here in Trinidad was very effective at one point in time. My father-in-law was actually part of the community policing unit before he retired. He's long retired now, but he was a part of that unit at one point in time. So do you see, units such as community policing or community security forces making a difference? Or has there been any talk or blogs or data to produce that these community policing units make a difference? They carry the statistics up or down?
Yes, I'm going to start by that question. In Latin America, there's been a lot of examples of not only community policing, but almost community neighbors watches around gender-based violence that have worked, because there is a person in the community that people know can talk and have this information and can refer people to places. So I think there is a lot of role to that. There obviously that requires training and making sure that your community force is good at responding and and understands this issue well. But I think there is a big space, and it should sit in that space with advocates also, and probably not only in the policing where people are just picked up and then let go the next morning. So I think there is a big role for community policing. To your first question, in commonwealth.org, there is a kind of a library per region and individual countries, and you'll be able to see a lot of statistics and statistical information around there. And the numbers are increasing. I mean, COVID has not helped, obviously, with people being locked inside a house without being able to go out. In many countries where there's being very strong curfews, having a lot of people are being, together and without able to go to work or, wherever the situations might not happen. So yes, do go to the website and you'll find a lot of information there.
Okay, thank you very much. Right. And I still have more questions, but again, I'll just limit them to one. In Trinidad here, there's a case in the Princestown district itself, which is in our district. It was in the newspapers just 2 days ago, where someone actually chopped members of his family, chopped his sister and her husband to death over a dispute. Now, some people are saying it's a dispute over some land. Some people saying it's a dispute over the way the family lives and so on. But my question to you is very simple. Apart from gender-based violence or relationship-level violence, there's also family, disputes that tend to crop up in communities. And where I live, I have been, by default, I've gotten, my nose where it shouldn't be in other people's businesses sometimes. And, it really helps if you have some sort of mediation training or knowledge that you can actually go into situations which are not just your run-of-the-mill couples fighting, but it's also where, they tend to war against each other for all these properties, house and land. I'm sure it's the same in the countries that you are in, right?
Yes, it is. It is the same. Family violence is another kind of, sub area of this dynamic. You have things like, for example, honor-based violence, where brothers are, for example, following their sisters. And I mean, you can give you a number of examples that it does not relate to only to intimate partners. And, I when I worked in court, I had many cases where mothers were desperate because their children were hitting them. For all kinds of reasons, right? And reporting a husband is one thing, but reporting your own son that that is physically assaulting you is something. It's another level of complete difficulty, right? There's so many mixed emotions there. So yes, all of these incidents of domestic violence take into account family violence and intimate partner violence, so both of them.
Okay, yeah. But that's it for me for now. I can always set up a Zoom and just ask you some more questions later on. Okay, I won't keep everybody here. Okay, so anyone else with any more questions?
Me.
Oh,
Hi. Your movement, Join the Chorus and Say No More. Is it something like the Me Too movement?
Danni, do you want to answer, or do you want me to go?
Yeah, you can go first.
No, I said, is it something like the Me Too?
Yeah,
Me Too movement?
Yes, it's Me Too and No More are very similar. Me Too came as the result of people telling their own story. They just wanted to say, this has happened to me. And so there's been a collectiveness worldwide around, people telling their own accounts of what's happened to them. No More works, it's a sister, Me Too is a sister organization. We work together globally. We produce resources and do, other different things, but they're very similar movements. And, they have their specific around people telling their own personal story. But yes, it's the same type of campaigning.
I think that's it's a good reference to this, and trying to, what was happening with sexual harassment, with the, suddenly a lot of change happened off the back of that, even Black Lives Matter. So creating cultural movements at the moment to tackle very big, world challenges, whether it's gender equality, racism, or now we're talking about domestic and sexual violence. So taking learnings from that and understanding the power of the collective, and to trigger more of a movement around that, I think it's a great reference, and one of the inspirations for developing Join the Chorus. Yeah.
Thank you.
So anyone else?
I think Zabida.
Zabida, see your hand was up. Zabida?
Okay, hi girls. Congratulations on the magnanimous amount of work you guys are doing. What I would like to ask you guys, everything starts in the home. Are there any programs in schools teaching children about violence and, helping children to understand, no, that's not right and it's not okay? Have you guys, are you involved in any school programs?
We are not directly involved in any of the in kind of doing any of the programs ourselves, but we work with organizations that do the programs. Those programs do exist, and I think this is it's an excellent reference. This, children, I always think that by the time that they're in secondary school, the damage has been done almost. It's really when they're little that you try to kind of change those stereotypes of how do they behave with their friends. In general, it's not only about, boys and girls, but it's just on how you relate to others, and how you kind of channel some of your anger and issues appropriately, for example. So yes, it is, the work is done. There's also work in secondary schools and in universities when, people go in. I think the secondary school curriculum in almost every country of the world around sexual relationships, etc., is inadequate. Here in the UK, for example, the curriculum is one from the 80s. So somebody was saying, for example, of my age, that they had seen the same video they were showing their children, so there is a lot of work to do that. And, I would always kind of, prompt you to ask your school, your secondary schools, what are they doing, for example, around this, right? Just for interest, how do they bring this topic out? Especially with, girls and boys, really. We did an exercise with boys in one of the trainings that we did for sports and coaches, and it was young boys. And we asked them, for example, to tell us in as many terms as they could, the word sex or having sex. And I'm going to leave that on your minds for tonight. And actually, when they started making this list, they came up with like 30 or 40 ways of, of saying this. Almost 95% of the terms are violent. I'm going to leave you on that trail of thought. So there is a lot of work there's a lot of work that can be done at secondary schools, and that, you know, I see that young boys and young girls take really well in, but we have a lot of conventions and stereotypes that we have to, like, you know, try to push and make sure that we understand that, you know, young people are dating, are going out, are having relationships, and that, you know, they do need this kind of education.
One example to point you to, Zabida and others, is a very successful program called Locker Room Talks in Sweden. So I have a client in Sweden, and this is a community there that they've been working with, and it teaches young boys about gender equality, masculinity, and how to treat one another and girls from this very, very young age. And it's called Locker Room Talks, because you're in this safe space in the locker room, boys and men, and talking about, you know, teaching gender equality from that young age. So to have a look.
Having worked as a district health visitor, both in the UK and in Trinidad, I have, you know, encountered a lot of this kind of problems. And, you know, that's why I'm thinking, you know, the best place to start is in the schools, you know, and there must be programs to teach from a young age all these things. So there's something called health and in the Ministry of Health, they have designed a program, Health and Wellness and Family Life, but I don't know how far it's gotten because I was on that committee. I don't know what's happening to it now. But, you know, being children now with all this COVID lockdown, and with recently we saw in Labre, the girls were giving lap dances to the boys, you know. So, and then what I'm worried about too, because of the lockdown and because of the children who lacking the access to proper education, in the next 5 years, what kind of children will we have in this country? It's worrisome.
It is, and it's again, I have to say, it's not only a problem in Trinidad. We're just seeing that, you know, problem. We're developing a guide also for parents to be able to have communication with their children about, you know, healthy relationships and sexuality, and just being able to break the barrier and start having. So we're developing that content, and that will come out in March, and I'll make sure that you know, your group gets a document and can share it around.
Thank you so much. Continue doing the good work, girls. I like to see the young people forward in the cause.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zabida. We have Rajiv. I see Rajiv has his hand raised. Rajiv, you have a question?
Yes. So, you know, you guys really presented some interesting statistics. My question is along the lines of, how has the pandemic over the last 18 months and a lot more people working from home really impacted these statistics and impacted the overall, you know, gender-based violence?
I think the numbers of reporting have certainly increased. There has been a big cry out by many organizations, including ourselves, to also to try to activate bystanders. So just telling people, for example, like, you know, if you see that something is happening, you hear that something is happening in, you know, in a neighbor's house, you should call. And you'd be surprised. Many of the reportings that have come through to the police here in the UK, a 50% increase has been from neighbors and other people calling the police because they are hearing or seeing something in somebody's house. Now, that is incredible because it's something that didn't used to happen. Right? So there has been an increase in reporting. It's difficult to know if it's increased really because we've been together, or it's just that our consciousness and more reporting has happened as a consequence. But it's interesting, even in, I don't know if many of you have seen this case in the United States around a young girl that was, allegedly murdered, but, you know, we believe so, Gabby Petito. Quite a famous case, and the way the police actually got hold of them, even though they couldn't avoid what eventually was going to happen, was because somebody called from outside a restaurant saying, I'm seeing this, you know, men slapping this girl, and they took the license plate of the call and called the police and said, you know, this license plate, he's taking the girl, he's slapping her. So I think, you know, it's also, you know, breaking that barrier, making sure that we can all, you know, do a bit about it. But I just think, to answer your point, Rajiv, is we believe there's been much more reporting and that there is much more consciousness about the issue. I
would just add to that, whilst it has been incredibly more negative because of the containment in the home, that actually, just on a personal note for me and how this whole thing happened, was I was triggered by the lockdown in the UK in March 2020 and reached out to Pam and then managed to get these volunteers together, which then created this elevated campaign. So it's raising the consciousness. And, you know, I've learned so much more about domestic and sexual violence in the last 18 months through doing this deeper work. And would I have done that before, or would I have done other causes and so on? So I think it's positive and negative impact, but hopefully there is growing awareness now because it is a shadow pandemic. Just as obviously the pandemic is having a compounding effect on many issues in the world.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, cool. Right. So so we're 8:04 p.m. and we would have started our meeting at 8:07 p.m. So we are stuck within our 1 hour time frame. So thank you all very much for attending. Special thanks goes out to Miranda and Clyde, our new or potential Rotarians. So I'm glad that they were here to see some of the work that Rotary does, and the quality and caliber of lecturers like Danni and Pamela that we have here in Rotary to bring about messages like this. You know, and to Danni and to Pamela, your work is amazing. What you do, it's not only just it's not only just phenomenal in terms of how you have been able to take a large amount of data and your abilities to assimilate that data and put it all together. Because I didn't even, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, how do you do a process mapping for something like this? How do you actually put together a structured systems design? How do you put together a structured analogy to actually come up with something like this? And you know, people always say that mathematics is part of everyone's life. And I always like to tell people that a good journalist is actually a good mathematician. A journalist actually is very good at mathematics, whether they like it or not. V.S. Naipaul wasn't really a literary person. He was actually a mathematician. And the reason for that is that he had the ability to take large amounts of information, large amounts of data, and actually assimilate that data and then get it out there into a readable format. And if you read his books, you'll understand that he studied lifestyles. And while he was speaking, I was thinking about Naipaul, because he recreates that aura of domestic violence into the Caribbean and Trinidadian lifestyles and really brings out that feeling in those books. And what you're doing, it's basically the same thing. You are the Naipaul of the world of domestic and gender-based violence. So I thank you very much for correlating that data, for joining it all together and finding that niche where we can get that balance between that kind of data. Hence the reason why I asked that question. So, you know, I respect your work. I think it's very good. And I do think there's a level of logical and mathematical foundation now that people can apply metrics, they can apply statistics, they can use those statistics later on. And as we know, Generation Z works with an app, they work with an application, they work with statistics. They're giving you a statistic for everything from cornflakes to milk. So hopefully these statistics can reach them mathematically and they could say, you know what, it's been up, it's been down, this is the percentage of areas and people around me that I need to reach out to, and this is where I need to go. So thank you very much, and that is the way I see your work to appreciate it. So on behalf of the Rotary Club of Princeton and all of us within the community, which we're going to reach out to and carry the message for you, thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us. Yeah. And take good care as well.